What just happened on that stage was not what anyone expected. It was supposed to be lighthearted. Another playful segment on a primetime TV special celebrating Black love in Hollywood. The host cracked a joke. The audience laughed. Cameras zoomed in for those golden, meme-worthy reactions. But then came a pause. A silence so sharp you could almost feel it cut through the air. Denzel Washington, usually the master of charm, wit, and carefully measured words, shifted in his chair and turned toward his wife, Pauletta. His expression was calm, but his eyes told a different story, one that seemed to have waited decades to be spoken. When the host asked the innocent question, "When did you know Pauletta was the one?" the atmosphere shifted. Denzel didn't crack a smile. He didn't tease with a witty one-liner. Instead, in a low, steady voice, he said, "I was obsessed with you, because you were the only thing keeping me alive." Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. The laughter evaporated instantly. You could hear the faint hum of cameras rolling, the nervous shuffle of audience members unsure whether to clap or hold their breath. And in that moment, the polished illusion of Hollywood glamour peeled back, revealing something raw, something frightening, something achingly human. Pauletta froze, her hand twitching slightly on her lap, her face unreadable. But those who've been married long enough know when a spouse isn't surprised by a confession. She already knew the story. What she didn't know, perhaps, was that he was about to share it with the world. And then he did. He continued, his voice tightening, saying, "You were my anchor when I was drowning in silence. The fame, the expectations, the lies, the pressure, nobody saw it. But you did. That night in New York when I didn't come home, you found me. And you didn't ask questions. You just stayed." What could possibly be behind those words? What did Pauletta see that no one else did? The host, normally so quick with a comeback, was struck dumb, blinking in confusion, his script evaporating from memory. And then Pauletta, her eyes glistening, leaned into her mic and whispered, "I remember, and I never told anyone either. Until now." Suddenly, this wasn't television anymore. It wasn't entertainment. It was testimony. It was confession. And it was love that had been tested in silence and shadow. She revealed that early in their marriage, when everyone assumed they were the picture of stability, Denzel had vanished for nearly 18 hours. Friends chalked it up to work, to long hours on set. But Pauletta, attuned to the quiet tremors of her husband's spirit, knew something was terribly wrong. She tracked him down, not to a set or a glamorous hotel, but to a dimly lit room on the Lower East Side. Inside, she found him sitting motionless on the edge of a bed, a revolver resting on the nightstand, his hands trembling, tears streaming down his face. Imagine that for a moment. The man we've all seen as invincible, the hero on screen, the unshakable Denzel Washington, nearly undone in silence. And yet, Pauletta didn't panic. She didn't scream. She simply sat down next to him, took his hand, and said 6 words that changed the course of his life. "I'm not leaving you here." For hours, they said nothing. The silence was heavier than words could ever be. She just stayed, her presence louder than any lecture, her grip stronger than any pep talk. And by morning, Denzel made a promise. Not to Hollywood, not to fame, but to her. He promised he would live for her until he could find the strength to live for himself. Can you imagine the weight of that vow? The gravity of knowing your existence was tethered not to applause, not to accolades, but to love, pure, unfiltered, unglamorous love? The audience in that studio was paralyzed. Some covered their mouths. Others leaned forward as if afraid to miss even a breath of this revelation. And then, as if on cue, the ripple effect began. Hollywood elites reacted instantly online. Viola Davis typed furiously into her phone and posted, "This is the type of love that saves lives." Literally. Tyler Perry, never one to hold back praise, called Pauletta a national treasure. Directors, co-stars, and colleagues who had worked alongside Denzel for decades admitted they had never guessed the depth of his private struggle. And suddenly, the conversation widened beyond Denzel and Pauletta. It spilled into living rooms, Twitter threads, and church pews. It was no longer about one couple. It was about all of us. About the unseen battles people fight behind perfectly curated lives. About the silent suffering that fame, status, or success can never erase. And here's where it gets even more powerful. Mental health professionals stepped into the conversation, praising Denzel's vulnerability. They pointed out that his admission wasn't just about survival. It was about the quiet heroism of Pauletta, who refused to let silence win. In an industry where Black excellence is celebrated but also pressured to be flawless, the Washington's moment cracked open a vital dialogue. At what cost does excellence come? How often do we assume strength when underneath someone is drowning? Think about how many times we've seen our friends or family smiling, posting, laughing, and never suspected the storm inside. Doesn't it make you wonder who in your own circle might be quietly waiting for someone to notice? The moment between Denzel and Pauletta didn't end with tears or applause. It ended with them holding hands, the kind of grip that says, "We've survived worse, and we'll survive again." And that image, two people bound not by red carpets or headlines, but by an invisible thread of survival and devotion, lingers long after the credits roll. Maybe that's why it struck such a nerve, because deep down we all crave that kind of love. Not the Instagram-worthy dates, not the scripted interviews, but the raw, imperfect, sit on the edge of the bed and hold me love. The kind that shows up when the cameras aren't rolling. The kind that keeps you alive when you can't find a reason on your own. So what do we take away from this? Maybe it's that behind every great success story is someone who stayed. Maybe it's that the strongest among us sometimes come closest to breaking. Or maybe it's simply that love, real, tested, unpolished love, isn't about flowers and anniversaries, but about choosing someone again and again, especially on the nights when the world goes dark. And if you think about it, isn't that the kind of love story we all hope to write? One where the applause fades, but the hand-holding never does? One where the vows mean more than the headlines? The world may remember Denzel for his films, his awards, his speeches, but after this night, many will remember him for something else entirely, for saying the words most people are too afraid to admit, that even icons can be broken, and sometimes it takes one person's quiet presence to put the pieces back together. And maybe that's the true legacy here, that in a world that worships independence, survival sometimes comes from surrender, surrendering to the hand that refuses to let go. So here's the question left hanging in the air. If Denzel Washington, a man seen as untouchable, can admit he almost didn't make it, then who around us right now is quietly fighting that same battle? And more importantly, will we notice before it's too late? Maybe tonight, the lesson isn't about celebrity gossip or Hollywood spectacle. Maybe it's about calling that friend you haven't heard from, checking on that sibling who's been quiet, or sitting in silence with someone who doesn't have the words to explain their pain. Because sometimes you don't need to fix it. You just need to stay. And as you sit with that thought, I'll leave you with this. Love is not the grand gesture. Love is the refusal to walk away. That's what Pauletta did. That's what saved Denzel. And that's what might just save someone you love too. If the story moved you, don't just scroll away. Share it, talk about it, let it remind you to show up for someone today. Because you never know, you might be the anchor keeping them alive.